Very well done. Open your Bibles to Psalm chapter 1, and we're going to dive into there today. Valerie is with our girls down in Southern California today. Michaela, who just graduated from college, had one of her art pieces purchased by Biola University. And so I've learned now that you don't hang art, you install art. So it's 14 feet long, so it's quite an installation, and anyway, we're really proud of her there. So, Psalms. So this series is called Cries of the Heart, Psalms for Summer. And last week, Darren started us off talking about that dynamic that we've all experienced in our lives when all seems right in the world. Some of us are there. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, we're enjoying life, it's good. But if your life is anything my life, the second law of thermodynamics takes over, and you go from order to disorder. And we've all experienced those times when all seems not right in the world. And by the grace of God, what we see throughout Scripture again and again is this turning. Darren called it a seraph, that little part that says there's more coming, and we can come back into new order, or we can come back into a place where life is right again. And I was reading my quiet time this week, and I came across this verse in Luke chapter 22. Jesus is sitting with his disciples on the day of the resurrection. He's appeared to them in the midst of the upper room, and he's convinced them that it really is him. And then he says this to them: "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you." Remember, as we walked along the way, as we talked, as we were out on the boat, as we were hiking in the Galilean foothills, these are the words I spoke to you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. And that piqued my interest, and I started thinking about all that was said about me, Jesus says, in the Psalms has been fulfilled. In your notes, I put this quote from Jonathan Edwards, who said, "The main subject of these songs," speaking of the book of the Psalms, "were the glorious things of the gospel, as is evident by the interpretation that is often put upon them and the use that is made of them in the New Testament. For there is no one book in the Old Testament that is as often quoted in the New as the book of Psalms. Here Christ is spoken of in a multitude of songs." So that intrigued me. I said, is that really true? And so I looked it up. Of the 238 direct quotes in the Old Testament, of the Old Testament and the New, 116 of those are from the Psalms. Jesus alluded to the Psalms over 50 times. Now, when you have Bible translators in your midst, you're always a little scary when you make claims like that. How does that sound, Brad and Wendy? About right? Okay, thumbs up. Good. Thanks. The message of the gospel, of the Messiah coming back, preached through the Old Testament. Fascinating study. And we're going to see over this summer some of these beautiful allusions, this typology, this precursor of Jesus spoken hundreds of years before Christ came onto the scene. Over the summer, we'll see Psalms that are what we call types, or typically messianic. We find numerous passages which written with primary reference to David and his kingdom. But then we see further, we see beyond them that they extend to the person of Jesus, who was this type, this one who's coming. And these types then point to things that are greater, and they fulfill the full intention of the story. It's like a prequel. And then you get to see the real story. And again, what we learned last week from Darren is that the story isn't finished yet. Amen? There are things we'll see in the Psalms that have not taken place yet, but make us look forward to his glorious return. In 1907, a Scottish preacher named E.S. McKittrick said this: "It has been asserted, and not without reason, that out of the Psalms, one could complete an entire biography of Jesus. I just captured a few of these because they're so beautiful. His eternal sonship in Psalm 2:7. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. His incarnation is told in Psalm 40:6-8. Again, as interpreted through Hebrews chapter 10, verse 5. The writer says, therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. His favorite name, the Son of Man, is taken from Psalm 8, verses 4 and 5, that has been near and dear to many of us. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. The richness of that theology with regard to Christ is almost overwhelming, to think that God planted in the Old Testament these seeds, these indicators, these pointers to think about Jesus. And again, when he came, when he fulfilled these things, when these words came off of his lips, they were not missed by the Jewish authorities. They were not missed by people who knew the story, who were looked at by Jesus. Now, whether they accepted him or not is another story. It goes on, Psalm 23. We can't skip this one. Again, Psalm 2, he's called the Anointed. In Psalm 23 is evidently where he gets the good shepherd from. His life of self-sacrifice is shown in Psalm 69. Again, as Paul references in Romans 15:3, for Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me. Zeal for thy house has consumed me, directly connected to Jesus in the New Testament. It goes on and on and on. His rejection in the 69th Psalm, his triumphal entry in Psalm 8, the conspiracy of those who are against him, Psalm 31:13, his betrayal by one of the 12, foretold in Psalm 41:19 and referenced by Jesus personally in John 13:18. The manner of his death, the disposition of his clothes, his cry on the cross, all referenced in the scriptures. His bones not being broken in the 34th Psalm, his dying words in the 31st Psalm, the resurrection foretold in the 16th Psalm, and his coming in judgment in the 50th and the 69th. This is what's ahead for us this summer. We're going to unpack some of these beautiful messianic psalms. We're going to see the cries of the heart that got fulfilled and answered in Jesus. I can't wait. I can't wait to see these. Psalm 22 is mind-boggling. Go home and read it again this week, just in reference to Jesus. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But where shall we start this series on the Psalms? Well, how about if we start at the beginning? Psalm 1. We're going to talk today about trees. We're going to talk about trees. You know, there's a lot of trees in the Bible. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I drove 6,000 miles so far already this summer, and it's only, the end of June, picking up kids here and there and wherever. We saw a lot of trees. We saw aspen trees in Colorado, and birch and cedar and dogwood and redwood and red oak and blue oak and poplar and pine trees and pine needles and pine cones and pine nuts. Many parts are edible. We've seen a lot of those trees, but one of the things that we noticed were trees that were dead and dying. And if some of you recall, there was a huge pine needle infestation, a pine tree infestation by this beetle. About 9.2 million hectares were in this attack. One statistician said it's the largest forest insect blight ever seen in North America. Huge portions of Colorado, huge portions of California, Oregon, Western Canada. I was talking to the leader, one of the facilities guys at Hume Lake, and I said, how do you battle against this? These, trees, hundreds of feet tall, and they've got this blight on them. What do you do? And he said, well, we've devised this system where we inject sort of like antibiotics into the root system and then allows the tree, this medicine to go up through. And this little insect goes in there and burrows, and it basically kills the trees. And there are 3 stages to this disease. There's the green stage, which a tree is healthy, and then they turn red, and then they go from red to gray. That same process can happen with you and with me. We can be in a season of drought. We can be where life is all right, but then the hot winds of trials begin to blow. We get into a season of drought where the joy of the Lord just isn't there, where we get bad news, where we're pummeled by disaster or fear or heartache. And how will we withstand that? What kind of a tree will we be? And what stage of health are you in? Are you green? Are you a little red around the edges? Or maybe you're gray. This idea of order, disorder, and new order. Psalm 1 is about how to stay in that stage of health, of greenness, of strength. And so Psalm chapter 1, verse 1, as Bob read it already, we saw this: blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked. This walk has to do with our pattern of life. How are we navigating the choices that we talk about every day? Philippians chapter 3, we discuss this walk of obedience, this walk in light, this syncing up of what we say and what we do. Our steps, our choices should line up with those of the Lord. And again, we'll see this more as we go through this summer, but as we read Psalm 1, we read this word blessed is in right relationship. In that place where everything is in order, where we're right with God. And as we understand that from a New Testament perspective, in a completed covenant perspective, oh, that means so much. That we've been united with God through the person of Christ, through that completed type of sacrifice, where God wove that story and pointed all those indicators toward the one sacrifice that would be made once for all, as we saw in Hebrews chapter 10. And so now with that finished work of Christ and the indwelling Holy Spirit promised in the book of Psalms, to which we'll see, again, we just have all these resources. Blessed is that one. Blessed is the one who's seeking to walk with God, to stay on the straight and narrow, to stay green, if you will. Reminds us where Paul says in Ephesians 4, walk worthy of the calling with which you've been called. And so what does that mean? The ESV says, who do not walk in the counsel of the wicked. Friends, do you know that the world is trying to counsel you today? That the wickedness of this world is trying to instruct you, to try to get you to think a certain way, act a certain way, buy a certain thing, drive a certain car, go a certain place. Oh, it's true. A generation ago, we learned how to win friends and influence people by telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. Papers, newspapers, TV, and radio. They were all pummeling us with these ideas. Recently, the girls had some friends over, and this Stevie Wonder song came on. Okay, I'm dating myself just a little bit here. A Stevie Wonder song came on. And I'm like, why are you listening to this music? This is my generation. The song's 30 years old. And they're like, oh, yeah, you know, it's kind of old school, kind of old-fashioned, golden oldies. I'm like, wait a minute. You know, how sweet it is to be loved by you. Oh, those words are on the tip of my tongue. I could sing the whole song. I remember those like that was yesterday. And I bet the same is true for you. You've got songs that you can remember, songs you don't even know you know, but you go into the elevator someplace and the music is playing and you go, and you start humming along, right? Why is that? Because there is a pervasive flood of influence that is coming your way. You see it every day, right? Point number one is beware of the power of the crowd. The psalmist says, do not walk with them. You have been influenced that every day. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked. The first bullet point there is don't be influenced by those who don't seek God. Now, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek because the reality is you will be influenced, and we'll see later how you counteract this influence. But you are constantly being given messages. Let me just prove my point. How many of you know what this symbol is? Okay, does anybody not know what this symbol is? Okay, well, you can see T-O-Y-O-T-A right there in that whole symbol, right? Just trace it out, right? How about this one? Anybody not know what this one is? My nephews weren't old enough to be able to see over the edge of the car. They were in their car seats. And McDonald's has strategically placed the height of their signs so preschoolers can see up over the edge and right up there. And in unison, the twins, under two, both erupted in, flies, flies, flies. Right? Yeah. And then, of course, how about this one? Yeah, the sign of original sin. You have these things inside your head and you're not even aware of them. You can think about them. You can recall them. Why? Because we're constantly being impacted. How about this? You deserve like a good, they're magically delicious, Lucky Charms. How about this? This will go back a little bit. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Okay, come on now. You see what I'm talking about? We don't even have to try and this stuff comes out. So when it says do not walk with that means we've got to be constantly working towards this. Today, it's even worse. Social media has created people that are, I'm not making this up, they're called influencers. Influencers. They have millions of followers. They become celebrities overnight, and they lose that overnight. With this reach, they can command 6- and 7-figure fees simply by recommending something in a social media post. Zach King, I don't know if anybody here knows him. Anyway, Biola student, I'm glad there's somebody there, has 21.7 million followers on Instagram. 21.7 million. People are looking to him for information about what to buy and where to go. So here's the message. We are fighting a constant and intense battle against those who are trying to push us into the mold of the world. And Psalm 1 says, don't swallow it, don't buy it, don't resist that. All right, second point is don't seek approval from people whose lives live contradictory to God's will. Notice now the next part of Psalm 1. Or stand. First, we're walking. We're walking. By the way, this message is called Boots, Roots, and Fruits. You know why? Because boots are made for and walk they're going to do. Because one of these days, these boots are going to walk all over you. Yes, right. So again, making my point. Boots, how we walk, but then we stop. We say, hey, what's going on here? Let's find out a little bit more. You see, it's a progression. Right? Standing, not walking this way, hanging out along for the ride, heading down the path. This is a place where advice is sought, but worse, maybe even approval. And so what will happen is that message will come in, and then pretty soon we want to fit in. And so we're going to adopt these ways in order to gain approval. I was a nominal Christian in high school. Grew up in a church where we talked about all kinds of things except Jesus. And when I got into high school, I wanted desperately to fit into the group. And so I went places and I did things and I adopted ways of thinking and ways of living because I wanted approval, not knowing that what I really wanted was approval from God through Jesus. And in my senior year, after hurting myself and others, I said, gosh, there's got to be more to this. And somebody told me about Christ and the approval and the acceptance that it means to be one of his children and to have a new family. People desperately are longing for approval and will buy and will do and will go and will say things that don't make any sense. Why? Because we long for approval. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, 13 and 14, the way is broad and many thereby who find it, who are on the path to destruction. If you want a happy time, you want a good time, you want a party time, then man, there's lots of people who will join you in that. The psalmist says, don't get your approval. And then third, he says, don't get your identity. Notice that progression. I'm walking, I'm standing, and now finally I sit down, make myself comfortable. Not sit in the company of mockers, or ESV says, sit in the seat of scoffers. These are my people now. I'm comfortable with them. We identify together. We have the same values. Guess what? They scoff, you scoff. They mock, you mock. And going against this grain means you lose your identity, your family, your tribe. And who wants to do that? And so then at that point, it's a matter of who am I going to follow? Jesus said, and we talked about this before, you cannot serve two masters. One of my professors in seminary said it this way: you lie down with the dogs, you get up with fleas. Make no mistake, you will be influenced by those. Now, you might be saying at this point in time, well, what about 1 Corinthians chapter 5, right? Are we supposed to be out of the world? Am I not supposed to have any non-Christian friends? Am I not supposed to hang out with people kind of on the ragged edge who are really lifestyle choices, thinking, mindset, turning away from God? But I love the way Wendy said it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be influencers, not influenced. And we're trying to point them just maybe a few degrees back toward a proper understanding of God, who Jesus really is, what he really came and said to do, not what you read on the internet. And so that idea of being aware of the power of the crowd, being aware of who we are around. These words, influence, approval, and identity. Again, powerful to understand, powerful opportunity for us to be there. Paul said you'd have to leave this planet to be away from people who need God. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about understanding the dangers, being aware of what takes when you do that. All right, now, notice, we got to move along. Notice what happens, though. Don't let your identity from people who actively mock God. But then he says, okay, so what is the answer? It's not this, but starting in verse 2, we see that it is this. Psalm 1:2, but his or her delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. Again, let's talk about that word law. Next week, we'll look at Psalm 15, and we're going to talk more about what it means to follow the law and what the law is. But again, through a New Testament context, these are God's instructions. This is God's guidebook, God's way of pointing us toward a life of blessing, obedience, and syncing up with God's plan for all eternity. So he says, in his law, in his directions, he meditates day and night. To delight means to have great enjoyment from something. Have you ever met a true fan? I mean, somebody who's really, really a fan. We have some guys who follow this team up in Oakland. They play basketball. It's called, the Warriors. All right, so this was a little bit hard, They didn't win the whole championship, right? But real fans don't care. They're still wearing the blue and gold. They're still, cheering. Why? Because when you take delight in something, now what he says is take delight in meditating, in deepening our walk with the instructions, with God's plan. I put it this way, we need to develop a thirst for God's word. Trees need water, and they send these roots way, way down into the what to find that water. We're going to see that in just a moment here. How do you get thirsty? Let me just ask you, how do you get thirsty? Right? Is it sitting in a nice air-conditioned building on Sunday morning with not a lot of nice people around you? Probably not. I guarantee you, our 60 people that are down in Mexico right now are probably thirsty because it's hot and it's dusty and they're working really hard to build these homes. The way you get thirsty is you get in a hot place, you exercise, you run, you sweat. That's how you get thirsty. many of us say, well, I'm going for it with God. I'm reading the Bible with my cup of coffee in my, quiet little garden area. And that's a great place to get refilled. I'm asking you this, where are you getting thirsty? The psalmist said, like the deer pants for the water brook, so my soul longs for you. Why does a deer pant? Because it's been running away from the, lions. Because it's dry and it's hot. And some of us go through these times and we get attacked and we have these cries and we're like, I'm going to turn to anybody except to God. That's when, friends, we need to turn to Him. When we're in the midst of that. Here's what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, 24 and 25. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. That's it. Put them into practice. I think I'm going to stop going to Bible study meetings. I'm going to start going to Bible doing meetings, right? Let's talk about what we're going to do. Do we really need more words? Do we really need to have more knowledge? Tozer said this, what we need to do is fall in love with the Savior, to lean fully on Him when the storm winds blow, to desire the desire to know God better, amen? To fight the lack of holy desire. This is what we need to do when we develop a thirst for God's Word. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in His law He meditates day and night. What do you do when you meditate? You say, God, tell me more about the truth of your word. I do this when I'm worshiping these rich songs. And sometimes I just have to stop on one of these lines and go, Lord, I need that in my life with my relationship with Valerie, or I'm not understanding one of my kids very well. And will you make that true in my life? And I can see 3 or 4 things that I need to do. And by that time, we're 2 songs later, and I'm kind of lost in what's going on. And then I got to step up and preach. And okay. That's why I'm kind of discombobulated sometimes when I come up, right? Because I feel like God is speaking to me in those moments. Jesus says the one who does these things, practices them, that's the foundation. All right. How can we be blessed? Beware of the power of the crowd, verse 1. Develop a thirst for God's word. And then third, measure your life by the fruits. Look at that, verse 3. That person, that is, that one who's meditating day and night, the one who is not hanging out with evil people to be influenced by them, that person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do, they prosper. All right, so again, here we are. We've got this tree. We've got it planted. We've got it. It's healthy and it's strong, right? Now, if I were to ask you what kind of tree this is, some of you might be able to tell by the shape of the leaf, the shape of the trunk, the texture of the bark, so on and so forth. I could tell you that it's in rich, dark soil. I could tell you get lots of water and plenty of sunshine, but you still wouldn't know what kind of a tree it is. Anybody know what kind of tree this is? Huh? Oh, you guys are good. Yeah, it's a mango tree, right? People who have spent time around the equator or other places where there are these trees, we say, yes, mangoes. I love it. It's my favorite fruit, right? But for most of us, for me, for instance, if I were to look to this tree, I'd say, I don't know, apple tree, cherry tree, lime tree. I would have no clue, right? But we look at the fruit, and that tells us how we're going and how we're growing. Have you noticed that some people gauge their success by what kind and how much they consume, not by how much they produce? Have you noticed that? I mean, that's basically what a status symbol is, right? I drive a Toyota. I eat at McDonald's. I use an Apple computer, right? These are indicators of my success. But we do that in church too. I'll ask somebody sometime how their relationship with God is going, and they'll tell me how many times they've had a quiet time, how many times they've consumed, or that they've been coming to church regularly. And I say, well, that's great, but how is your relationship with God? How is that hearing and doing side of things? Jesus said this, you will know them by their fruits. All right, I'm pushing forward a little bit. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from bushes, nor figs from thistles. Are they? Every good tree bears good fruit, and a bad tree bears bad fruit. So you will know them by their fruits. So what we need to do then is to think about our fruits. California is the land of fruits and nuts and flakes. So let's take a look at some of the fruit. First of all, we see that knowing God, starts with an understanding and deep conviction and firm resolution. That's that planted by streams of water. There's stability. There's an ability to weather that heat blast, to weather that tragedy. We turn to God. We run to Him. What roots give to a tree are what our thoughts of God are for a Christian. Roots give stability, nourishment, encouragement, and determine what kind of tree is going to be there. A.W. Tozer said, what comes to our mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. So, how do we do that then? Well, we sink our roots deep into God's Word. Secondly, we see productivity, which yields its fruit in season. Knowing God will produce personal growth and evidence of Christian character, not just about what we know, but what we do. Galatians 5:22 and 23 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Are those fruits hanging on the limbs of your tree? Are you seeing them come regularly and progressively? Bears its fruit year after year after year. Don't point back to a mango that came up 2 years ago. No, it's what's fresh in your life. What is God doing today? Jesus said, I'm the vine and you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. God longs for us to bear fruit. And then we'll see the third fruit is longevity. Knowing God allows you to weather problems and trials without the loss of personal integrity or conviction. Again, whose leaf does not wither. Pressures will come, tragedies will strike, and distractions will come into your life. It's guaranteed. How will you weather those issues? And then finally, knowing God shows you how to prioritize your life according to His value system. Whatever He does, He prospers. And again, looking at Philippians chapter 4, we saw this is not about making a lot of money, not about having a lot of possessions. It's making an impact for God in the kingdom according to His time frame. And there then we see the final stage where He contrasts the wicked. And again, they will not stand in judgment. When it comes to God's approval, they will not have it. Nor will sinners be in the assembly of the righteous. They won't be in that group that identifies as God's people. For the Lord knows the way of the wicked, but the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. That's not where we want to end up. That's not the pile that we want to be on when Jesus comes back, right? So, by application, how many of you have ever seen this sign coming back into the state of California? What is it they want to know? They want to know, what kind of fruit do you have, right? So inspect our fruit. Are we stable? Are we growing? Are we producing new and fresh evidences of God at work in our life? Is it clear that we're going to be there for the long haul? And do we have God's priorities? Check your fruits. If the fruits aren't looking good, check your roots. Where are you sinking your mind and your eyes and your heart into? And if both of those don't look good, then friends, check your boots. You know what you catch on the bottom of boots? It's evidence of where you've been walking. And that's God's plan for coming back into righteousness, that coming into a place of order. I close with a story. And I'll tell it quickly. We got a phone call from good friends of ours, Stan and Kim Kenyon, down at West Hills Community Church. A young man had been playing on the shore at Hume Lake Christian Camp. And he was active in church, played in the worship band, Connor Williamson. And like many of us have done, Connor saw the cool, shimmering water of the lake and decided to run and jump and dive in. What he didn't know was just below the surface of that water was an enormous rock. Connor hit his head and instantly began to drown. There was, by God's providence, an emergency room nurse and doctor on the beach. If they hadn't been there, he definitely would have died. He was paralyzed and is today paralyzed to the neck down. We were praying fervently. As I thought about Connor's dive, I thought about how his body followed his head. His body went where his eyes were looking, and that's how it is with all of us. What you're looking at is what you will become. Bob Goff in his book, Everyone Always says this: where we turn our heads is where we'll land our lives. It happens all the time with careers or relationships or possession. It doesn't matter whether it's comparison or distraction or escape that turns our heads. What we look at will be the difference between a great dive and a big disaster. Doctors told Connor's parents, get ready to have your son die. He will not live. Last Saturday, Connor celebrated his 11th year of life, and he still loves Jesus. Whether your life is in order or disorder or needs to come back into order, Christ is what makes the difference. Knowing Him, following Him, living for Him. Let's pray. God, thank you for this word of encouragement. Help us, Lord, to keep our eyes and to keep our boots and to keep our roots in the right place. God, give us that thirst. Give us that desire to see and know and walk with you in new and fresh ways every day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thanks.